I make a joke all the time too. I'm like, you don't have an Adderall deficiency. Like, let's take a deep dive into what's going on with the brain there. And
you don't have an Adderall deficiency. That's funny. Tell me, it's so funny. I tell everybody you're my doctor, but I don't think you're actually a doctor, are you?
No, I'm a nurse practitioner.
Okay, that's what I thought. But I thought today I should ask her, what are you? You're a nurse practitioner.
I'm a nurse practitioner, yep.
In my opinion, nurses are care like forward. Like doctors are treat forward. Mm-hmm. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I make a joke all the time. I went to school for 9 years. I didn't go to school for 9 years to just write prescriptions and just do the same thing. I went to school to care for people and to make a difference. You know, our education, our background is about caring. We talk about the language of caring, how to meet the patient where they are. We learn about that all in nursing school. And so when you go to NP school, it's additional school, you know, after your bachelor's degree. For some of us, it's a doctorate. So it is, you know, it's tough. I will say that it's definitely not as tough as going to medical school. I will agree with that. But we get bedside hours. I get to do things that the doctors don't get to do. I get to see the human side of it. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a different experience. It's different training, different experience. Nursing is a form of medicine. And we just have a different outlook on whole person health, meeting you where you are, just literally the people that are going to hold your hand, get you through the toughest times. Trauma was my background. And so trauma and surgery and, you know, just seeing people when they're most vulnerable and then filling that gap. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, being in that, I've been in my career for over 25 years now. And, you know, Brigham and I started this, he was like, the system is broken. Let's do something. And it originally started out with, we were going to do a referral system. I was going to order labs and then we were going to refer people to different providers. Like, we can take care of this. And it kind of evolved a little bit and it was like, no, we can take good care of people and I can do what it is that I want to do. And we had this, you know, kind of side eye each other like, I don't know, this is different. And we shook hands in the hallway and he's like, listen, I just want to take good care of people. And I was like, I will build this for you. Just let me take good care of people.
Oh, it's amazing.
And that's how I started.
That's how it started. How did you meet Brigham?
I met him in the operating room, I think it was like 20 years ago-ish. And at the time I was a charge nurse and I was running around. We were doing trauma and I needed a camera for a patient that they were going to scope before they did the X-lap. And the camera broke. Mm-hmm. And they were like, call the rep, bring the camera in. So I called the person, you know, whoever was on the on-call sheet. And Brigham shows up and, you know, gives me the camera. And then, you know, I did power shifts. And so 4 hours later, I need another camera. I'm calling Brigham again. And so Brigham kept showing up. And I'm like, I'm going to keep you. You show up to take care of people. I'm going to keep you. And I told him that. And he's like, yeah, okay, Marta, that's fine. You know, and then, you know, fast forward all these years. When he decided he wanted to develop Ways to Well, you know, they reached out to me and they were like, you know, can you help with it? I was like, yeah, absolutely. But I hadn't planned on leaving. I had a nice, steady, stable, you know, I only worked 6 or 8 hours a day. It was kind of nice. I wasn't planning on leaving and I could take my kids to school. I had a nice balance there. But the mission to genuinely take care of people was it. And then to be able to partner with somebody that cares as much as I do, that's genuine. Yeah. So
that's great. So how do you care for people?
There's a lot of it. You know, we talk about whole person health. So the most common thing that we do is blood work. I look at blood work and I look at the difference between normal versus optimal. And I give people the imaginary bell curve. When you go to the primary care doctor, as long as you're within this normal range, you're good. I'm looking at optimal range. So I give visuals and analogies. I tell people if you're going the wrong way down a one-way street, I'm not going to wait until you crash and then say, oh man, this is preventable. I'm on the side of, hey, we've gone the wrong way. Let's course correct and let's go back in the other direction. Well, how do you determine that before you have a problem. You look at that optimal range. So the optimal would be, basically where are the healthy people? Or we're looking at trends of blood work. That's probably the most common thing we do. I also do gut health testing and micronutrient testing, different things that the primary care team, they're not necessarily looking for. They don't have the ability to. Insurance doesn't cover that stuff. But root cause, looking at what's going on, looking at symptoms. But it all starts with a conversation. I don't know if you remember, you and I had a conversation for about 30 minutes. What are your goals? What are we looking at? What are your symptoms? And I actually talked to Bert before I even talked to you, because he was like, I'm going to do this for my wife too. And so we just set goals, and then we meet and talk about it, and then every symptom, every lab result that's not within the optimal range, we're looking at why. Is it diet? Is it stress? Is it genetics? What do we need to do to get you to the optimal range? And symptom resolution. So it's not just numbers either. So, and one of the things when you guys had that conversation on the last podcast, and you're like, oh, the night before I had this terrible event and it was awful and I've never behaved that way. And I went, welcome to menopause. I'm your tour guide.
Yes.
So having those real conversations, it makes a difference. It's identifying something that shouldn't be there and then finding ways to course correct and hopefully prevent that from happening again.
So it sounds to me, and my experience has been, you are, I've met with other people in your company, not just you. So I think this is indicative of Ways to Well, not just Denise. You've built a company, in my experience, that's built on care for the person, truly listening to the person, believing what the person has to say. I feel like a lot of times in standard medical practices that people don't feel believed, especially women don't feel believed. I didn't feel believed before I met you, by my internist, as the reaction I was getting from her for telling her my symptoms were like, I don't know. And you're like, well, what do you mean I don't know? I can't. Drastic changes in my health and symptoms showing up suddenly are not I don't know.
Yeah.
So I found you guys to be, maybe this is the wrong term because I don't have a medical background, but a little bit of a diagnostician as opposed to what I experienced at my regular doctor. Would that be somewhat accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I call it peeling back the layer of the onion. I make a joke like, okay, let's lay some groundwork first. Let's talk about, I call it life optimization, health optimization, your sleep, your stress, nutrition, your partner, all the things that, in your life that matter. And then we just start peeling back the layers of the symptoms. Okay, what were you doing when this started? And sometimes it is like, well, welcome to menopause. Right. That's why I make the joke. Sometimes it's weird, like, hey, you've got some mold exposure, or, you're not digesting your foods. That's one of my favorite stories. One of my female patients, she's an athlete. I talk about her every now and then. She was a competitive CrossFitter, and she's like, I don't feel good. My performance is dropping. I'm like, well, technically you don't meet the stage for perimenopause. She was 32. I'm like, it doesn't track, but she had some of the symptoms. I'm like, well, your protein is really low. And she's like, that's crazy. I eat 200 grams of protein a day.
What? I
have a nutritionist. And I'm like, yeah, but ingestion doesn't equal absorption. And she's like, that's interesting. No one's ever told me that. I have a nutritionist. I have my primary care doctor. She had a thyroid specialist. She had all these things. And she's like, it doesn't track. So I literally only gave her digestive enzymes. And I was like, let's work on your digestion and your protein absorption. And let's see how many things correct when you're actually getting the nutrients that your body needs. And she just started taking digestive enzymes and started absorbing her proteins. Her performance went up. She went up so much, she was actually tested for doping.
What?
Got off of all of her other medications and continued to compete. And she did extremely well just on digestive enzymes, just looking at symptoms, so the labs were the clue that she wasn't absorbing some of her nutrients. And then just having a conversation about what are you eating? When are you eating it? What type of foods do you have? And I mean, that's a big thing. People are just somewhat unsure what to eat, but she was already dialed in. She was exercising and like, what am I going to do to make it better? You're already hitting all the marks and, you have better biceps than I do. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to help you. That's what was going on in my inner monologue. And so just adjusting those digestive enzymes, and she's kept killing it. Had a couple of babies since then and just like living her life. And so it's, sometimes it's really that simple. Sometimes it's like, we've got some autoimmune things going on. Sometimes you have to keep looking and keep peeling back that layer to the onion until you get down to the center of the cause.
Why do you think that the regular medical doctors, in my experience, I'm sure there are some who do look at blood work the way that you do, in a more comprehensive kind of like peel the onion back. How does this affect that? I'm going to misspeak about 1 million things that you've told me. So I'm going to say this affects cholesterol, and you're going to go, that's not what it is. But I know that you have told me things in my chart where you go, well, this part of your cholesterol is high, but this over here is okay. So then I'm not worried about that. Mm-hmm. But then I go to my doctor, and my doctor goes, this part of your cholesterol is high. And you go, but Denise told me this has to do with that. And so I actually believe that. And I know one time you had said to me something about taking a synthetic medication for cholesterol is worse for your body than taking a biodiverse hormone that affects your cholesterol positively. But why doesn't the medical field look at it like that?
It goes back to training and education. In school, and my personal opinion is there is a lot of big pharma involvement. There's a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs that are working on education. And I was a victim of it too. I mean, when I was in school, like these drug reps would come in, and I'm like, oh, this is great. I was like, yeah, I'll absolutely prescribe this one. And just not knowing exactly the side effect. So when you're talking about, and I'm not against drugs. I'm not against big pharma. That's not it.
Me neither, by the way.
Yeah, it's not that. It's whenever you take something, there's a cost benefit. What is this going to cost you? So when you're talking about cholesterol medications, just taking a cholesterol medication to lower the numbers, it's going to come with some side effects. Mm-hmm. So we're going to maybe have some joint pain, some worsening memory. We're correlating a lot of that to worsening Alzheimer's disease risk. So because your brain is made of cholesterol, your body needs it for repair. It's found in every cell in your body. So looking at the types of cholesterol, the size of the particles, that's huge. But also, I talk about cholesterol being an ingredient. And so whenever women come in and they're like, oh, okay, my cholesterol's high, my doctor wants to put me on a statin. I'm like, okay, let me check your hormones. Let me see where your estrogen is. And I talk about it, again, with my visuals and analogies. If we're going to bake a cake, we're going to have some flour, sugar, eggs, milk, butter, and an oven to bake it in. Well, if you're not baking as much, some of those ingredients are going to pile up a little bit. So cholesterol is one of them. So, again, if your bakery's not baking as much, those eggs are going to collect in the refrigerator. So why not start baking again? Why not let's get that estrogen back on board? That tends to balance it out. And I always make a joke too, like, hey, when you were 24, your cholesterol wasn't high. What shifted? What shifted when you were 44? Mm-hmm. Your estrogen changed. You're in that chaotic area of perimenopause where everything's just kind of haywire before it stops. And so sometimes you'll get labs and it'll be beautiful. And sometimes it's crazy high, crazy low. So I look at the ratios, the size of the particles. Triglycerides are probably my biggest indicator of a real problem or a real metabolic problem. But it's not just that. It's also looking at insulin. Insulin resistance it can be an early predictor of heart disease. It can be, metabolic disease, unmanaged glucose. So there are inflammatory markers. There are other things that look at. And that's why I like to do a whole blood panel when I do it, just to look at everything and how your body's reacting at that moment to see how everything's tied together. And so I have patients that come to me, they're like, yeah, my doctor put me on a statin. I'm like, okay, great. Let's work on your hormones first. We're going to correct this. And once we get that corrected and we start pulling back, I didn't need it. Mm-hmm. And so the statins make the numbers look pretty. And I'm not against statins. And there are some patients that absolutely need them. But let's first address the root cause. Mm-hmm. What changed? And I have women tell me all the time, I'm eating exactly the same. I'm exercising the same. I'm not doing anything different, and my numbers are changing. I'm gaining belly fat. One of my girlfriends, she's like, I need to talk to you. Something's different. And she's very active, and she's like, this is different. She's 52, and she's like, I think you're right. I think it's time to do the estrogen. I'm like, okay, well, we'll have a talk about it. And I mean, I know how she eats. I know how she exercises. And she's like, so you're telling me that no one escapes from this? And I was like, no, ma'am, it is coming for all of us. And she was like, I thought I could, her genuine conversation was, I thought I could diet and exercise my way out of menopause. And I'm like, some of the symptoms, sure. But it's coming for all of us.
It's coming for all of us. This is an ad by BetterHelp. Men today face immense pressure to perform, to provide, and keep it all together. So it's no wonder that 6 million men in the U.S. suffer from depression every year, and it's often undiagnosed. It's okay to struggle. Real strength comes from opening up about what you're carrying and doing something about it so you can be at your best for yourself and everyone in your life. If you're a man and you're feeling the weight of the world, talk to someone, anyone, a friend, a loved one, a therapist. With over 35,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. And it works with an app store rating of 4.9 out of 5 based on over 1.7 million client reviews. It's convenient too. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, switch therapists at any time. I have been in therapy for a long time. Therapy changes its purpose as my life changes, but I find it as invaluable as like drinking water. So invest in yourself if you're interested in BetterHelp. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/wife. That's betterhelp.com/wife. Wife of the Party is sponsored by Masterclass. What's something your moms always wanted to do? Get into painting, write that novel, make the perfect croissant. Whatever it is, you can finally help her achieve it with Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. For still only $10 a month billed annually, a membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every single instructor. It's an amazing deal. Bring your dream home to life on any budget with Joanna Gaines. Improve your physical and mental well-being with leading gut and brain health experts, and turn your passion into achievements with cultural icon Martha Stewart. And the classes really make a difference. 88% of members feel that Masterclass has made a positive impact on their lives. I don't listen to the radio anymore. I love in the car to listen to a Masterclass because I feel like I'm learning so much while I'm driving. So you don't just have to watch them, you can listen to them too. Our listeners always get great discounts on Masterclass of at least 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/wife. See Masterclass's latest deal at least 50% off at masterclass.com/wife. Masterclass.com/wife. Well, that's exactly what was happening for me. I'll talk about my story now. I think maybe a good common place to start from. I had COVID immediately. First day of COVID, I had terrible diarrhea. I had diarrhea about 10 times a day before 10 a.m. for about 3 months. Didn't leave the house until 10 or 11 o'clock every day. After that part of the day, it calmed down. It was just first thing in the morning. I gained probably 15 pounds in like 3 months, like boom. I just put it on. I work out 3 days a week with a trainer. I've always eaten a very low carb diet. I don't eat a no carb diet, but I don't eat pizza and I don't eat bread every meal. I don't even eat bread every day. I've always eaten, pretty lean proteins and greens. For the most part, and I was just packing weight on and having all this diarrhea. So the two, to me, didn't make any sense. So, of course, after 3 months, I went to my internist, and she did blood work, and she found that my testosterone was at a 16. And I guess, if I remember right, it's supposed to be like between 60 and 250. And I was at 16, and I asked her about that. I was like, that seems extremely low. And she goes, it's your age. And I was like, well, what about all this diarrhea? Like, I can't just not leave my house. And she was like, I'm not sure. Maybe you're due for a colonoscopy for your age. So ask your doctor when you get your colonoscopy what he thinks. Okay. So she was like, take some probiotics, which I was already doing. But she was like, maybe take a little more and see if that affects your stomach. And my stomach started calming down just naturally, I think. But 3 months was a long time.
Yeah.
And then I got my colonoscopy, and that doctor said, yeah, you have some inflammation in there, but I don't know the cause. See you in 10 years. I was like, but so that's the answer? What should I be doing about this? And he goes, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. It's just looks like, I see some inflammation. And around this time is when Bert had started, I guess, talking to you. And then I was like, I can't believe that I'm getting no help. There's no way it's a coincidence that the first day of COVID, I had these bowel issues and they've never left. That cannot be unrelated. Yeah. And then I kept thinking I probably should be going into menopause, but I'm getting my period every month. So I'd asked my doctor also, I forgot about this, I'm on the Nuvo ring, but I'm at that age. I have a feeling that the ring is keeping me getting a period. So should I stop taking birth control? And she said, well, only if you replace it with some other form of birth control. And Bert was like, I will not be using any form of birth control. And I was like, dude, help me out. Like, please let me figure this out. And he was like, nope, I'm not doing a condom. Can't do it. I was like, how about vasectomy? And he was like, nope. So I was like, well, I'm hesitant to get off. I am a fertile myrtle. If nothing else, I've always been pretty fertile. So I was like, I'm not ready to go off that. And I'm not getting pregnant at, 50.
Yeah.
So, and then I talked to you and, you, if I remember it correctly, were like your inflammation is like, there was a bar on your graph and my inflammation was so far to the right of that. You were like, this is one of the highest I've ever seen. So this is a big problem. This is probably why you're having the gut. This is probably why you're gaining weight. Your body can't deal with your weight if it's what you explained to me was if your inflammation is that high, then the other things that your body needs to take care of, it just can't do it because the inflammation is so high, it's just focused on inflammation and targeting that. So when you explained all of this to me and explained to me and validated to me that my hormones were wacky, because literally my doctor saw relatively the same blood work you saw because it was like a month later. It couldn't have been drastically different from what she saw. And literally what she said was, it's your age. There was no support, no help, no validation for how I felt. No, she gave me advice when I turned 40. And she said, just so you know, every 10 years a woman puts on 10 pounds. So you should start now dealing with your diet and exercise to prevent a 10-pound gain. You're still going to gain weight, but slow down the 10 pounds because by the time you're at 60, you will have gained 20 pounds. And I was like, I'm doomed. What? Is that what you remember my first visit? Or do you remember you've had so many patients?
Well, I do remember talking about your inflammation and your body prioritizing and having that conversation about, hey, you're prioritizing the damage right now. So you're not going to correct your cortisol. Your hormones are not going to respond efficiently to anything we do until we correct this. And when you have a toxin like COVID or something, we eliminate our toxins in 3 ways. We pee them out, poop them out, and sweat them out. So we're really efficient at removing it, but you were so imbalanced that it was just taking so much longer. Mm-hmm. So getting that help and getting those, and estrogen is very protective. We don't give enough credit for how protective it is. Same thing with testosterone. Testosterone is a pro-hormone that, cascades into the other hormones that we need. But that was a big conversation. And Bert, when he talked to me about it, he was like, I need you to help LeeAnn. I need you to help my wife.
Yes.
I want you to do all of this for her. And I kind of joked with him. I was like, I love when I get to optimize couples because it just makes it so much more fun. And he was like, okay, what do you mean by fun? I was like, all the things that go with that. And then we were meeting again somewhere in between. And this is a really funny story, but he goes, Denise, LeeAnn booked a hotel room. We went on a date and LeeAnn booked a hotel. I just wanted to call and say thank you. I was like, oh, good. That's great. And,
yes.
All the things that go with that. He's like, she's feeling so much better.
Yeah.
And those are my favorites whenever, those are my favorite visits, my favorite discussions when it's like, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like. Thank you.
Yeah.
And like you said, you feel validated. And to say it again, we just don't learn it in school. We're not taught that. We have to go back. And so after I finished NP school, I make a joke that I have the alphabet behind my name because I just keep getting certifications. I'm like, let me learn about this. Let me let me add to my alphabet. And it's not just about that. It's like, what else can I learn? I forever want to be learning. But, reading about it, having the initials behind my name that says, this is what I've done. This is what I've read about and tested on. That's great. Going through it, wildly different.
You mean going through menopause?
Oh, yeah. So I firmly believe it takes someone, we have to teach it from the perspective of I've been through it instead of, and I think that's what we've missed. And we know we've missed it on studies. Years and years and years of not including women in studies. We just started doing it recently. And all these men are telling us, oh, this is, she's histrionic. We need to do a hysterectomy. We need to take the ovaries out. We don't know what's going on. All these crazy things. No one's looking for, the chaos. No one's looking for how that affects us. So I think, that starts with the education side of it. But I mean, going through it, wildly different. So all these random symptoms, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when so-and-so told me about that. Yeah, that tracks. And so I'm kind of keeping this mental mark of, yeah, it feels different. It feels different than what's in the book. Mm-hmm. So being able to explain, I think we could probably come up with 50 symptoms that are related to menopause or perimenopause, and just nod. Happy 36th birthday. Welcome to the club. Because you just statistically meet that mark. But weird things like frozen shoulder. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting in the office and I'm like, what have I done? I can't move my shoulder. And this is absolutely what for months I couldn't figure out. I went to chiropractic. I did everything I can imagine to unfreeze my shoulder. And it was actually a chiropractor. I was like, oh yes. And he casually said, you should know that's part of menopause. And I'm like, yeah, I should know that because it is. And oh gosh, I'm there too.
Right?
What? So that was my first clue, was the shoulder side of it.
Wow.
And
what causes that?
We think it's just the shift in estrogen, the drop in estrogen, because estrogen lubricates the joints. Mm. And there's a fascia change, there's a fluid change, and it just happens to be, I think it's where our more dominant arm is. I'm left-handed. It was on my left side. I'm just talking to my patients. That's why I came up with that. But it's just one of those wild things that, just like dry eyes and everything is dry when estrogen drops, joint pain, just weird, aches and pains that weren't there before. Those were the ones that I was like, I didn't do anything yesterday to feel this bad today. What happened?
It's so crazy, the array of symptoms. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine from the outside, from a male perspective, that I would imagine Bert saying, well, basically everything is a symptom of menopause because there are so many. From mood swings mm-hmm. to dry eyes to dry vaginas to lowered libido to anger issues. Mm-hmm. I had some rage moments. I had 4 discernible, specific moments where I just went black and was completely rageful. And it had happened. I talked to you about it, right? Coincidentally, happened the day before my appointment with you. And I was like, this is something else. I thought for the first couple, I was just really angry at the situation because it was not really triggered by anything that deserved that much anger, but it was definitely triggered by something that would have made me angry anyway, but maybe not like angry. But that one, the last one, really didn't make a lot of sense. So the last one, I went, wait a minute, this is not. And then when I backtracked, I went, I had postpartum and I had rage.
Yeah.
And then, I got in fist fights in high school and college. I vandalized people's homes. I raced cars for money. I tried to hurt myself, not like suicidal, but I'll jump off the highway bridge into the river. Nothing's going to happen to me. Watch me. I was just angry. It started tracking where you go, well, those are when your hormones are really a little out of whack right after you have a baby, mm-hmm. when you're an adolescent. And now again, so then for me, I was like, I wish, and who could have told me this, but I wish I had known, because when I had a toddler, my mother-in-law was like a baby brain development person who like accredited preschools based on the growth and development of infant to age 4 brains. So she was an expert, I guess one would say, in that period of life. And she told me once, whoever your toddler is, that's who they're going to be as a teenager. So if your toddler lies, they're going to lie as a teenager. If your toddler cries at everything, they're going to cry at everything as a teenager. So pay attention to your parenting issues when they're that age, because they're coming back in high school. And I thought to myself, I wish someone had told me that about menopause.
Yeah.
Because for me, the symptoms I had, or that rage moment I had in adolescence and after I had babies and in menopause. So fascinating.
When I talk to patients, I'll ask, if they're kind of on the cutoff line, I'll ask, after babies, did you have postpartum depression? And so, sometimes it's like, yeah, it was severe. I'm like, okay, then you're probably going to experience some very severe symptoms when you go into perimenopause. And I don't know, I call postpartum depression a hormonal emergency. It is not a mental health issue. It is a hormonal emergency.
100%
And
agree.
if somebody's giving you clues, pay attention. If you think somebody's at risk, pay attention. We need to love on these women because this is a real emergency. We've just never given it the attention that it needs. But that's also a really big clue. If somebody says, yeah, I've struggled with that and I don't know that I've ever recovered, I'm like, okay, red flag, red flag. I need to start supporting you probably much earlier. I need to start giving you some dietary recommendations, some lifestyle recommendations, maybe some supplemental, something to keep those hormones in a good place, and then pay attention closely. And when you start to notice the changes, hey, let's have another conversation. And I for most of my patients, once we're smooth sailing, we'll see you every 6 months or so. But sometimes I'm like, okay, I think you're good for a little bit. We'll coast it out. And 6 weeks later, I get this call like, something's not right. I'm like, all right, okay, let's talk. Let's schedule a visit. Let's see what's going on. What symptoms do you have? Because it can change that fast.
Right.
And it's so chaotic.
Yeah.
And just in my circle of friends, doing what I do, I'm like, oh, I know what phase you're in right now. And this is going to be fun. I pick up on these things that it's just, I wish it was textbook. And you said that in one of your other podcasts, we don't have a protocol. You cannot have a protocol for chaos. I mean, how do you have a protocol when everyone is a little bit different? We're also biochemically unique. But you had clues, just like your mother-in-law said, like, hey, pay attention. So with Georgia and Isla, how they're going to behave and how they're going to have, maybe how they behave after when they have their babies. And we're in a position now that we can help our daughters. We can help so they don't have to, I'm in the generation where we didn't talk about it. I actually had to ask my mom, did you go through menopause? Did what happened? I don't remember my grandmother ever mentioning it. My grandmother was a healthcare provider. I just remember it was very hush-hush, and I don't know if she had any symptoms. And I'm like, why aren't we talking about it?
Why didn't anybody talk about it?
I think it was just so misunderstood, and the stigma of it being mental health instead of a chemical problem, like a real hormonal problem that, in my mind, it's easy to fix. Like, we support your hormones. Duh, check the box, we've got it. Now, again, back to the no protocol, you can't just say, here, everyone get this one dose of this one thing,
right,
or here's 3 things, you're going to get a standard dose. It just doesn't work that way. We're all so biochemically unique. Everyone has a different experience. Sometimes I start people, I'm like, here's your testosterone. You don't need any estrogen, progesterone yet. But this is also how I'm going to support you. And sometimes I just start with progesterone. I never do estrogen unopposed. So if I'm giving estrogen, I'm always trying to make sure you have enough progesterone. But some dosing is different. Supportive measures are different from person to person. So, but like I said, we're in a position now we can have these conversations and coach. Back to the school part of it, this is also where we should be teaching that in school. It should be a menopausal woman that's going, pay attention to this sign, pay attention to this sign. If somebody tells you this, listen. We're trying to formulate a questionnaire because I make some of the uncomfortable conversations very comfortable. I'm like, are you having sex? And I get this, everyone postures like, and then I'll say jokes, if you're not horny, you're not healthy. So, let's take a deep dive. And I try to make it a little bit uncomfortable because we have to call that out.
Yeah.
That is an important part of relationships and just your marriage and your commitment and yourself, like all the things. And, just people fear like, oh, I'm broken. Something's wrong. My libido's low. I'm not wanted anymore. I just don't want the touch. No, that's a big sign. And I'm trying to formulate this questionnaire that makes it easier to answer so that you don't have to sit across from us and go, yeah, I feel like a shell of a person and all the symptoms that go with it, because that's uncomfortable. But sometimes those questionnaires are like check the box, like, yeah, that can open up that discussion and make it a little bit easier. And that is, especially in our age group, it's a little more challenging because we're that I feel like we're the first generation that's like, something's wrong, I've got to fix it. Right. Like, I'm gonna bust down the walls, we're gonna make some change. But it's starting the conversation. And just like I mentioned, I'm like, I'm a little shy. I'm probably not going to talk about those things. I can imagine, I don't know that I would really bring that up with my primary care doctor, even though I know what I know. And I'm like, I'd probably just deal with it. If I wasn't a healthcare provider, it's fine. I'll just mull through it. And we don't have to. It doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
Using you and Bert as an example, you guys are just enjoying each other's time. You're flirting, you're dating again. Mm-hmm. How wonderful is that? How, this part of life is where we're not set out to the sunset. It's not we're not meant for that. We're meant to enjoy it. And
we are enjoying ourselves, not just in that kind of sexy way. But as you were talking, I was thinking, it was such a funny joke when we were teenagers that our parents would say their hormones are raging. Well, why can't our hormones be raging now? My kids are gone out of the house. I got 25 years of nothing to do but look at this one guy. I'd take some raging hormones, no problem. Wouldn't that be fun? Instead of looking at it as, I'm not feeling comfortable. Well, why not? I mean, the thing, at least with me and Bert, we know each other so well that sex now is better than it's ever been, because there's just, we just love each other, warts and all. When you're younger, you feel differently about your body. Your body's probably better looking. So, or you're in better shape when you're younger, at least we were. And now we're both like, well, we're both a little bit broke down here and there. We're both a little bit flabby over here. And I got too many freckles in a bunch of places from sun damage, and just throw all the inhibition out. What's the point? And I think before I started hormone replacement therapy, if that's the proper term for part of what I'm doing, I think that my hormones were just like, why bother? Like, this is too much effort. I'm too busy fighting this inflammation, or I'm too tired, or I just sweat for an hour and I feel disgusting now. So, I had a lot of don't touch me. And you know what? When I had my second baby, I had a lot of don't touch me. And I think I grew up an only child, fiercely independent, with no siblings, no cousins. I was very much like, I'm taking care of myself. When you have a baby, they're on you all the time. But I think that was part of my chemical makeup, and my hormones being out of whack made it really intense. Yeah. Where I was like, don't touch me. I don't want a baby to lay on me, which is so awful to say out loud as a mom, because of course I love both my children, obviously. But I remember having those, I want to come out of my skin moments of like, don't touch me. So I don't know why that wouldn't be something similar to, I don't want anybody to touch me when I'm 50 and going through menopause. Yeah. And having all that wackadoo stuff. So let me ask you this. What kind of training did you seek out past your nurse practitioner to get yourself educated in this way? Like, if I were a nurse and I were listening to this podcast, what kind of education did you seek out?
The first thing I did was functional medicine. So the first thing I did was get functional medicine certified.
What does that mean?
Think of it like root cause illness. Just looking at outside of the box of the standard. Cholesterol's high, here's your statin. Cholesterol's high, why? What's going on? That's a clue for me. I call cholesterol your first responders. So whenever I get a blood test back and the cholesterol's high, I'm like, okay, so all of your firefighters are responding, but they didn't start the house fire. So let's find out. I talk about leaky pipes too. I'm like, if you come out every morning, there's a little puddle of water on the floor, the third day, you're not wiping it up anymore. You're busting behind the wall. You're trying to figure out what's causing that leak. That's functional medicine. It's looking at root cause. It's testing things like, a deeper level of testing, your cortisol levels, even looking at your DHEA, gut health testing, micronutrient testing, genetic testing, things like that, Dutch testing, cortisol, all the things that would give me a clue of what problem you're facing, mold testing, things like that. And so I got the certification on that one first, and I was like, this is fun because I'm finding things and fixing things and getting people off of medication. Do you know how fun it is to take somebody off of blood pressure medicine because they were not deficient in losartan, they're deficient in magnesium. So you get a magnesium, and they don't need the blood pressure medicine anymore. It's like, that's
so much
win.
better for your body.
Yes, that's a win. I make a joke all the time too. I'm like, you don't have an Adderall deficiency. Let's take a deep dive into what's going on with the brain there. And
you don't have an Adderall deficiency. That's funny.
Yeah, it's an awkward conversation. Then they're like, well, but I need it. And I'm like, right, because your receptors are saying that you're starving without it, but what would trigger that? So functional medicine is looking at, what's missing, what's causing that chaos. And then I have BHRT or bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I have that certification too. And it took me about 2 years to go through the whole program. My dad died suddenly in the middle of the program. So I was like, I'm done. I can't add anything to my plate. I was absolutely devastated. And then I was like, I was optimizing my dad before he passed for a different reason, clearly. But I was like, I think I need to finish this. I need to finish it for me. And so I went back and did the whole program again. So I ended up taking a lot longer, but going through the second time around or, midway through and starting over, I was like, I've learned so much. I have, and even just doing this with Ways to Well for the last, 8 years now, I've learned so much. And it's, the patients will teach you too. You have to be willing to listen and learn. And if you look in my videos, I have my white coat hanging in the back. I don't ever wear a white coat. You don't ever see that. I don't want that type of relationship. I want to have, let's sit down in your living room. Let's talk about what's really going on. So after those certifications, I got a couple more. I've got certified in random things and trauma and emergency and all the things like that. But that's where I started when I transitioned to whole person health optimization. And I give a visual, like, if you're looking at a wheel, you're looking at spokes in the wheel. Mm-hmm. And if I need to look at the entire wheel and all of the spokes. So I'm looking at sleep and stress and nutrition and exercise and relationships. I'm looking at all those things that make you. Mm-hmm. And if there's something that's broken, that wheel is going to be weaker. So your system, your body are going to be weaker because of that. So that's part of functional medicine too, is just looking at the whole person. But yeah, that's the route that I went after school.
When I started this podcast, it seemed like I had to figure it out all on my own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming. And every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. We've been using Shopify for a very long time, and I like the fact that it's very user-friendly. I am not tech savvy. I don't get a lot of these behind-the-scenes websites, but Shopify makes it easy to check your inventory, to look at your sales, to track your shipping. I love it. And like I said, we've been using it for years. Turn your business idea into cha-ching with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/wife. Go to shopify.com/wife. Shopify.com/wife. That's pretty impressive. And it seems actually pretty achievable for a healthcare provider to go, you know what, I'm going to add this to my tool bag because it seems invaluable. It seems like, how do you get out of school without that functional medicine? They just don't teach it. Is it just a new philosophy or?
Well, the history of it, functional medicine was actually the original medicine.
I would imagine, on the frontier.
On the frontier.
Yeah.
It was the original. We had tinctures and supplements. We had, we would brew some tea for a headache. My poor kids, we don't take any medicines. We don't have anything, they're like, they know their oils and they know their tinctures and they know how to make their tea. And they know the remedies that I use at home. Because, even my kids are like, I probably need water or magnesium if I have a headache, and they'll go take water, magnesium, or, I'm feeling a little run down, dump in some creatine and drink it and go. They're really good about it because I've educated them on that. We've missed that. We've missed that for the last 50, 100 years. So, back to the education system and big pharma and pushing drugs and, these unnatural remedies. And I'm not saying that all of them are bad, and I'm not saying that they're not needed. I want to be very clear about that. There are many cases where we need those medications, but if you have hypertension, it's not. There's probably a root cause. There's probably something. If you have high cholesterol, it's probably something. Let's look at that, and before I just start dumping in medications that are going to cause a worsening side effect, or another meds that you have to take to deal with those side effects, and then you have lots of meds on board, and then lots of complications. I can go real deep on the how that started, but I'll keep it light. That we just went astray with the education side of it, and I do think there's a huge awakening, and I do think I think COVID just woke people up. Like, hey, I felt better when I was taking my vitamin D. I felt better. We're looking at the statistics on these people with higher vitamin D levels. Something was up. I drink tea every day. So those, antioxidants were on board. I didn't get COVID for 5 years. I just got it like February, I think, this year.
No way.
Yeah. I do the same regimen. I take the same supplements. I do the same thing. I'm not saying I never get a cold or get sick, but the only reason I knew it was COVID is because I lost my sense of taste and smell.
No.
I'm like, something's different.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I had 4 days of that, and I was like, that was it? And, that was all? Okay, well, I probably didn't need a shot. I probably didn't need anything other than just some rest and my green tea concoction that I do and a little bit of vitamin C, and I moved on.
Yeah. You were healthy to start with, really healthy to start with. So your body was able to take care of it.
Yeah.
That's really good. I've always said it's really a shame that this is just me not knowing nothing about nothing, but I feel like when penicillin showed up, these other types of home remedies fell away. And that may be completely inaccurate. But to me, I go, penicillin was saving people's lives at the time. It was, and it still is, a very necessary drug.
Right.
But it's interesting to me that it's the answer for everything, or some form of penicillin, an antibiotic, is the answer to just everything from an earache to a yeast infection and everything in between. And you're like, well, what they do before this. People didn't die of yeast infections before. They maybe died of pneumonia or something, but surely they had some other treatment for an ear infection, a compound. I remember my grandmother used to have, I wish I knew what this was. She had a yellow powder that was in a test tube that had a cork in it that she got from the local witch doctor type woman, that if I got a cut, she sprinkled it on and that cut would heal like that.
Yeah.
She had a drawing salve. When I got a splinter, she'd put a drawing salve on it and put a Band-Aid on top of it. And a couple hours later, she would pull the salve off and it would pull the splinter out.
Yeah.
But nobody knows what these things are. When I'm like, have you just put a drawing salve on it? And they're like, what are you doing? It's pretty cool to watch because it works.
It works. And that's what we forgot to look for why. We forgot in our training, we just missed that. We just stopped looking for the why.
The why.
And if you're not looking for the why, then you're not looking for the simple fixes. It's a big Band-Aid.
Preventative
stuff.
Preventative medication. I don't think preventative medication is supported in healthcare, and maybe by insurance companies. I don't know who the culprit is, but I don't feel like preventative care is supported much at all.
It's not. You have to have a diagnosis code and a reason to be seen in order to get reimbursed. And, we're talking about big insurance controlling that. People want, insurance doesn't cover what I do because I do prevention. I'm on the side of early detection. I'm looking for things that aren't there yet, trending in the wrong direction. Insurance doesn't cover that. You have to have the crash. And it doesn't matter how long you've been traveling the wrong way down a one-way street. They're not going to intervene until you have that crash. And you have people that are like, well, my insurance doesn't cover it. I'm not going to do it. I'm like, your insurance is not trying to help you.
Yeah.
They're not trying to look out for you.
No.
And that's one of the things that Brigham talks about when he goes around, he's spreading the word that, hey, the system is rigged. It's rigged against you.
Completely.
And so waking up, COVID, waking up, people saying, something's wrong. Something's different. My friend was healthy. My friend didn't get it. What were they doing? They're starting to see that difference. My kids see that too. They're like, they'll ask me questions. Why is so-and-so always sick? I'm like, I don't know I don't know what they do in their household. I don't know. And well, can I bring some tea for them? My son's like, can I bring them some tea? Or, because I make all my little teas and tinctures and things. Just looking for why, looking for the cause.
What's interesting to me is that I've gotten, as much as my internist, who is now retired, so I don't even have an internist anymore. I feel like you look at my blood work, and if there was something you were concerned about, you would say, you need to see a cardiologist, but you don't. So I just go to my gynecologist because you obviously don't deal with women's health in that way. So I had my exam today, coincidentally, and I told her everything you had prescribed, my estradiol, my progesterone, my testosterone, my metformin, and I told her all the supplements I was on, and she told me that whoever was taking care of me was taking very good care of me, and that she would be happy to collaborate with you and to write prescriptions if I needed them. She was very happy to work with you. And now Bert's cardiologist was the same. So Bert's cardiologist said, I think you need to be on testosterone to support your liver health. So whoever you're dealing with, let me talk to them and let's get on the same page. And I feel like if more doctors had that perspective, not necessarily that they need all the knowledge, but they embrace the knowledge that you have as important as their own, that one doesn't cancel the other.
Right.
But my internist, I felt, just really wasn't interested in exploring anything outside of, is your age, I did. And I actually hear that. I think people have a real misconception of hormone replacement therapy. And I think it's unfortunate. I read this article about in the 90s, maybe, where estrogen got some really bad press, and it was incorrect press that was quietly corrected. So the incorrect press was very loud, and the correction of the incorrect press was very quiet.
Exactly.
And so everybody still remembers the very loud. But it's kind of been totally debunked that hormone replacement therapy will cause cancer or cause cancer to grow rapidly, or am I getting this right?
No, you're right. That was a study that came out, and then they said, estrogen causes breast cancer, and it was just blasted out there. So all of these women got off of their hormones. They're like, I don't want cancer. I don't want cancer. And then they quietly said, actually, this study was flawed. My bad. You're right. Just kind of put it out there. Let me redact that statement a little bit. And then, so we had this whole generation of women that were just poorly treated because of that study. And even now, like, I'll meet with a 40-year-old that's like, estrogen causes cancer. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And I make a joke, again, with my one-liners. I'm like, well, if estrogen and progesterone and testosterone caused cancer, we would have raging prostate cancer in a bunch of 14-year-old boys and raging breast and uterine cancer in teenage women and pregnant women. During our pregnancy, our hormones are off the charts.
Yeah.
We don't have this problem with cancer at that time. And in fact, we're actually using hormones to treat cancer now. We're using testosterone to treat prostate cancer, using estrogen.
Really?
Yeah. And so and I tell people too, I'm like, think about when you were 14 years old, when you were 20 years old, when you were 30 years old, cancer wasn't a scare then. It's a disease of aging. And so what's absent or what changes as we age are hormones.
Oh my God.
And so if we're talking about disease, the longer you're on the planet, your chances of cancer are going to absolutely increase. But what are your catalysts that would speed that process?
Right.
You're missing hormones. And so, addressing them early. And it's not just, hey, I think everybody needs to be on hormones, because that's not it. Sometimes it's just, you're not sleeping, you're not setting a bedtime. And my internal monologue will say, oh, you're a trash panda. You eat late at night, you're snacky all the time.
Trash panda.
And that's funny. Our alien, we have this little app, and our alien actually said that because we play with him, and he said trash panda. And I'm like, I've only said that out loud in my own office, like never to a patient, never out loud. But I'm like, I'll think like, oh, you're eating late at night because this is crazy. Your metabolic system's all off. But it's funny that I've said it, like kind of whispered it to myself as I'm reading labs, and it repeated it back to me. And I was like, oh gosh, I have to be careful. I never say that again. But, you can do some big hormonal support changes by lifestyle.
Right.
Like you said, you were already eating healthy. You were already doing those things. And there comes a point where you're like, that's why I said it's coming for all of us. But at what point? What can we do before that? Mm-hmm. So it's not just, happy 36th birthday, here's your testosterone. Not in all cases. Sometimes it's, hey, you got to get to the gym.
Right.
You got to get some good deep sleep. You got to put good foods in your body. Mm-hmm. You got to, I tell people sometimes you just have to turn off the social media and get a break from that. Go outside, touch the earth, reconnect, hold hands with your partner, do something.
Get in a community.
Do something, yes.
Be of service.
You own your own health, and you are responsible for that. And that was also, back to the culture of the white coat syndrome and things, the doctor would come in and the doctor would say, oh, you've got to do all this. And people would blindly, oh, I've got to take this for this and this for this and this for this. Or sometimes I'm on these 5 meds. I would get this in the ER. I'm like, what are you taking them for? I don't know. My doctor gave them to me. And I'm like, well, did you know you have high blood pressure? No. That's why I take a medicine. I'm right. For high blood pressure. And so there was just a disconnect. Mm-hmm. And it was, well, the doctor told me to do this. The doctor told me to do that. And I'm like, we have to change that. We have to change that conversation. We have to break that wall down. It's not working. Mm-hmm. And we have to be our own manager of our health. It's important that people seek out what's appropriate for them.
Totally. And that's about having an honest conversation with yourself about what's not working.
Right.
The reason I started working out with a trainer, I was 49 and I have a front loading dryer. Well, everybody has a front loading dryer, but I was squatted down at my washer dryer, and I noticed that I was having to hold the top of the dryer and help myself up. And I went, whoa, I'm only 49. What's this going to be like at 59?
Yeah.
Like if I can't get up off the floor without a little bit of assistance, and I wasn't like pulling myself up, but it definitely gave myself a little stability and a little nudge to get myself up off that. I was like, I'm done. I'm done with that. I am going to go see a trainer because, and I know I say that as a person who can afford a trainer, and not everybody can, but I can tell you this. There are tons of resources on YouTube that are totally free for strength training, stability, flexibility, into geriatrics, into aging. There are a ton of absolutely free resources to get your body healthy from a strength, flexibility, stability perspective.
Absolutely.
I am very lucky to be able to go to a trainer, but that doesn't mean you can't change your focus and start seeking out resources, which brings me to some people. I've been so excited that you're coming on this podcast. I've told so many people, and I had a couple good friends who said, not everybody can afford to reach out to someone like Denise in Ways to Well. And I said, actually, it's less expensive than you might think, even though it might still be cost prohibitive for some people. So I wanted to draw both pictures.
Yeah.
What's the realistic cost of taking care of your health through a company like Ways to Well. And how can you do that if you can't afford that? Like my medications per month are not expensive. They are like $80 for the whole month and I have 4 different medications. Now, I'm not talking about my supplements. I'm talking about estradiol, testosterone, progesterone, and metformin, and thyroid. So I'm on 5. It's not very expensive. I mean, people might think I'm paying like $500 or $600 a month.
Right.
But I'm not. And to be honest with you, I think if I know I can't go through insurance with you, but my doctor, and if you can find a doctor in your town that's like my doctor who says, if I need to write prescriptions for you, I will. I would imagine that means if it comes from her, it's covered in some capacity under insurance, maybe not. She just asked me that this morning, so I haven't had time to research. But I wonder if you had a doctor who would work with someone who is like you could find a middle ground of having insurance pay for something.
Yeah, some of the meds, some of them can be. Compounded medications are not covered by insurance, so that sort of dosing varies, and that specificities on dosing would be. It would be hard to say exactly, but
Sure.
in general, yeah, you can get some progesterone from CVS or Walgreens, and that's bioidentical. You can get estradiol from CVS or Walgreens, and it's bioidentical. Testosterone for women, they don't. It has to be compounded, so you'd have to have a compounding pharmacy. But even I use Revive RX Pharmacy. Their compounding cream, I think, is $45, and
It lasts a long time. For me, it lasts like 2 months or at least 2 months. It lasts a long time.
It does. I really think, okay, so that we have options with HSA. If you have HSA or, health savings account or, flexible spending account, that's an option too. The biggest part is finding someone that can interpret the labs, and that's the hardest part. So insurance will cover some of the labs. And I feel bad when this happens because I have patients that are like, hey, can you use my insurance for my labs? And I'm like, okay, but I would love to. I really would. But what they're going to charge you is twice as much as I would charge you for your co-insurance. So when I order my lab panel, I'm ordering $3,800 worth of labs. And so my negotiated cash price to the lab, I've got that down to, $350, $400, $380, I think, like that. And so you're getting all these labs at like 10% of that cost. Well, if you have co-insurance and your insurance demands it, you have to pay your portion of that. And that's usually at least 20%. And that's with their in-network billing. So things like vitamin D, they're not going to cover vitamin D. And so they will bill, I think they charge me, I don't know, $25 or $30 for that test, but they bill insurance, 10 times that amount.
Wow.
It's absolutely crazy.
That's crazy. It should just cost what it costs.
It should just cost what it costs. And that's,
that's a shame.
It is.
Then that's such a misunderstanding. I didn't understand that. So let me recap. If an insurance company is paying for your labs, it's just for argument's sake, because I don't know what I'm talking about. It's like $4,000. But you have been able to negotiate it for like $400. But then I have to pay out of pocket the $400. Whereas if I went through insurance, I would be paying 20% of $4,000, which is $800.
correct.
So even though it seems like I'm paying a lot out of pocket to you, I'm paying far less than I would pay out of pocket if I went through insurance. That is insane.
It's crazy. And it's so frustrating because I have had patients that are like, I will use my insurance, and I will tell them, I'm trying to warn you against it. I'm not saying no, I'm trying to protect you from this extra bill. And then we would use their insurance, and then they're like, I've got a $1,200 bill. Who's going to pay this? I can't. Once we use your insurance, I can't do anything. I can't.
Yeah.
I have no negotiation power whatsoever.
That sucks.
It does. And so, what I tell people is, and yes, it's not a bill that you want to pay because we pay for our health. We pay for our health insurance. We pay for things, so if your health is your wealth, and prioritizing, and it's hard. I telling someone, hey, you have to pay $549 for this, visit and all the labs and everything that you need. It's like, that's a little it's troublesome on the budget. But if you're, we usually do, after we get the first visit, we get a good established plan. We'll do a follow-up, And so I do a much smaller panel just to check the things that I need. And then 6 months later, just make sure everything is good. And so we're looking at about twice a year. So you're budgeting, around probably $600 for the year. And that sounds silly that, it's $600 for the year, but if you're setting aside a little bit every month, it's so much more affordable than trying to use your insurance in most cases. And now for your medications, that's a wild card because it just depends on what you're on, what your insurance network is. I send things to Revive because, like me personally, my progesterone is cheaper. My insurance doesn't cover it. Mm-hmm. So my out-of-pocket cost is like $20 more than paying cash for it at Revive. So I just pay cash for it at Revive.
Right.
So, it just saves me. I'm just looking at those numbers on that side. And it's hard. It's hard to have that conversation because I want to take care of people and I want you to use your insurance because we truly believe I'm setting aside my household. We pay $1,200 a month for our health insurance.
Totally.
We don't use it. My kids aren't sick. We don't we don't need it.
Yeah.
So gosh, I would sure love to use those funds for when I do my own lab work or when I need to do some testing. So what I tell people is if that's that much of a struggle, we can absolutely meet you where you are. Let's at least have a conversation. Let's see, if we're not doing meds and labs, let's have a conversation. And I do these lectures and I talk to people and we do seminars and things like that just to hear some coaching opportunities. We put a lot of stuff on social media too, just so people can have some free content on what to do. And I still get these private messages. They're like, yeah, it's not working for me. I want to do this. I'm like, okay, well, then, I wish I could make it better. I wish that I could use insurance.
But you have to, you have bills to pay. You have to, I don't feel like the amount you charge is $549 is that right?
Yeah, that's the, for the initial visit and the 45-minute consultation. I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody. It is cost prohibitive for some people for sure. But I would have expected that you would have charged me like $5,000. Like for the service I've received from you, for the in-depth understanding and the teaching that you give me about what's going on in my own body, I am shocked it's that inexpensive based on my experience with talking to you for 2 years now, coming on almost 3 in October will be 3 years. It's such a value because it's changed my life for the better. I feel like I'm so much healthier and I just wish, I just don't want anybody to I don't know. I just want it communicated that the value for what you're receiving is really there. Yeah.
And I'm shocked that it's only $550 plus your labs. I'm shocked.
So yeah, that's plus your prescriptions. And then we get a report. So I'll give you a report on your numbers. I'm going to give you, most of the time it's about 30 to 35 pages of your health. And I'm going to be tracking that in my system. So every time we meet, I'm looking at those numbers and I'm comparing. Mm-hmm. I love that. That's my favorite part. Like, hey, this is where we started. Look where we are now. Like, this is so great. All these trends and changes. And I'm setting your trajectory. Mm-hmm. And that's, I wish there was a nicer way of saying it, but, that's your investment into your health. So, I have people that are like, well, how about this? How about this? Can I use insurance for this? I'm not saying no. I'm saying I'm just trying to protect you from getting these side bills. Or, I've had several times where, and this is so frustrating, I'll send this whole lab order and they're like, we did 3 things. And I have a patient that comes back with just one blood test, a $3 blood test. And they're like, my insurance covered it. I'm like, great. But it's missing 99% of the information I needed. I can't really work with that.
So what can someone on a limited budget do if they say, I just absolutely cannot do $500? I can't even afford the medication. Is there a supplement? I know one of the first times we met, you had talked about taking something that I'm no longer taking that was very just healthy living supportive. Mm-hmm. Is there anything like that, that someone should do? Or are we all so very unique that there's not like everybody should have vitamin D,
Well, there's 3 things that I think everybody could benefit from: magnesium, vitamin D, and your B vitamins. Mm. And so if you get a good multivitamin, a good quality vitamin D, and a good magnesium, I like magnesium glycinate at night, magnesium 3-8 too, if you're really having trouble sleeping or winding your brain down. I think I'm going on millions of biomarkers. I have thousands and thousands of patients. So me coming up with those wasn't just a random, like this is looking at the age category and identifying those 3. For the general population, yeah, that can make a big difference. You can feel so much better. But I will say, when you're picking up a supplement, turn it over and look at the back and look for additives and fillers. If it has anything other than rice flour or gelatin, pick a different supplement. If it's got, all these fillers and binders and excipients, that's kind of junk that you don't need. It decreases the absorbability and your bioavailability of whatever you're taking. So like getting silica or, something that just makes the machine work a little bit faster. So you're not getting a high quality supplement. So that is important. So, I know Walgreens will have buy one for $5.99, you get 2 free. And then, you're getting a very little bit and a lot of excipients and a lot of binders and a lot of junk. And you just don't know. Supplement industry is I could go down a 3-hour diatribe on that one. But the supplement industry is a little questionable when it comes to quality and purity. So pick a high quality brand and look at the back and make sure. We made our own supplements for that reason. This has been a 5-year battle for me trying to find a good company that would make, excipient-free stuff, no dyes, no fillers, no junk. But again, those 3 things, that's huge. Resistance training. Use your lower body muscles, engage your muscles. Anyone that's over 35, I'm like, okay, let's turn down the CrossFit. CrossFit's great for some people, but for some people it's really overstimulating. And just focus on resistance training. Lift heavy, move the weights. That preserves your bone. And with estrogen loss, it increases your chances of developing, bone loss. So, the resistance training makes a big difference. Sleep optimization, go to bed. Everyone's like, oh, this is my quiet time and the kids are asleep. So I'm going to stay up till 1 a.m. and just try to get stuff done. And I'm like, but you're setting your circadian rhythm and you're shifting your cortisol. It's going to be more harmful than helpful. So just prioritize different things during your day and prioritize your sleep. Morning sunlight. Go outside. Let the sun hit you for a couple of minutes. That helps to set your circadian rhythm too. Take your shoes off and touch the earth with your bare feet. I know it was hard to do that in the wintertime. And I was telling my patients, it's okay, just a couple of minutes, just touch the earth. Or, but people feel so good when they come back from a beach vacation or lake vacation because they have walked on the beach. They've been outside. They have, just shed off all the stress and they're sleeping and it's wonderful. So those are things that are, all those other things that I mentioned aside from the supplements, that's free healthcare. Like those are things that you can do. It doesn't cost anything to make those changes. This is a big one too. If you are harboring unforgiveness or anger towards someone and you are just holding that in, you are carrying around luggage that is not yours. Just let that go. That affects you. It affects our cells. Just let it go. It sounds easy, and for some people it's a process to get through those things, if it's hurt, but just, identify that and work through letting it go. Because if you're holding on to that anger and resentment, that does affect your hormonal health. It affects your sleep. It affects your mood.
There's a great quote from Nelson Mandela about that. Do you know this quote?
I have heard it. I can't quote it, but I've heard it.
He said, resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the person you hate to die.
Yeah.
You are ingesting poison. I mean, resentment is poison. And forgiveness is freedom from resentment. And whatever you got to do to forgive somebody doesn't mean you have to forget.
Right.
But you can forgive. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It's the opposite of drinking poison. Yeah. It's a gift you give yourself. And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Nobody has that conversation. When you go to your primary care doctor, your OB-GYN, are they asking you, are you sleeping? Are you having sex? Do you have toxic people in your life? Are you exercising? You're not getting any of that.
No.
And that we're missing that. We're missing that conversation. We're missing that element of actually talking to the real person.
Right.
Let's peel back those layers, look deep. How can we identify some things that are affecting your health?
Well, you're making me feel even better. So the gynecologist I went to this morning, it was my first appointment with her. And she asked me, she said, clearly you exercise, but do you exercise? How often? Do you have a lot of stress? How is your sleep?
Nice.
How were your relationships? She asked me all that. And she was like, HRT for life. I'm going to be on that until I am dead. I love it. She's also menopausal, postmenopausal. That makes me feel really good about her.
Yeah.
As I was sitting in her office today, I thought to myself, I'm at an OB-GYN, obstetrician, which is someone who delivers babies, gynecologist. But almost all, there was, if I remember this correctly, there was one question on a very large questionnaire that had anything to do with menopause. And that was, do you have hot flashes?
Yeah.
Everything else was about a period. Not even like, are you still having a period? That wasn't on the questionnaire. When was your last period? Wasn't on the questionnaire either. And I sat there and went, why isn't there another slash and something else after GYN? OB/GYN/ postmenopausal person.
Yeah.
Like, why? Why? Because not that this doctor did anything wrong. I think she obviously, I've just sung her praises this whole episode. But it just struck me. Should there be another doctor for this time of life? You know?
Maybe not a subspecialist. That's the other thing too, siloed healthcare. And like you mentioned, collaborating, having these discussions with the cardiologist and the orthopedist, everyone gets in their own lane of like, this is my specialty. So this is what I know. I don't know anything else. And a lot of times it's like, I don't know it, so I'm going to bash it. And so I don't know that we need to have another specialty versus another. I think that's when your functional practitioner would shine, like kind of being the central agent to, all the specialties. And sometimes I'll see something on the labs and I'm like, I don't like this. You have to go see somebody. Yes. And, I give them like, here's a note. Here's why. Give them these labs or give me their contact information. I'm going to make sure that they have this information. And I've accidentally caught cancer 13 times because of that. And I'm like, I just don't like this. There's something a little off. This is not normal. Or I have, trends and changes. I recently diagnosed my friend. I didn't diagnose his prostate cancer, but I was seeing him. I'm like, I don't like this. Go see, you need to go see your urologist. We'll recheck your labs 6 weeks later. It was a little bit higher. And he came back and he was like, oh yeah, it's prostate cancer. And I was like, whoa. And he was like, well, they told me to wait a year and then they'll take it out. And I'm like, what? He said it was so small that it wasn't big enough to operate on. I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that.
I don't either, because it's big enough to have affected your blood work.
Right.
Isn't that big enough to take it out?
Yeah. So I do a lot of, I optimize the immune system to help your body fight cancer, because we fight cancer all the time. It comes and goes. But when it's turned into a tumor and it's solidified into a tumor, then that's a little bit harder for your body to fight. So I do things to optimize the immune system. So I was like, well, we're going to do the things that I do to optimize your immune system while they watch and wait. And I just saw him 2 weeks ago-ish, and his levels are back down to normal. They went from optimal to outside of that optimal range and still in the normal range to high. Now they're back normal. And, we changed a couple of things in his diet, cut out alcohol, all the other things. And, he's like, is this something my body can fight without surgery? I'm like, well, we'll find out. They're going to wait a year before they would do surgery anyway. So we're just going to keep checking your values. We're going to keep optimizing your immune system. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. And he's going to go for a check again in a few months and see what size it is, which I thought was interesting. Like, it's not big enough. So the only option is surgery. And we have to wait for it to grow so we could cut it out. And I'm like, whoa, we've missed that. Who talked to him about what to do in between? And, again, that's where that central person, find you a functional practitioner, find you somebody that's going to look at every other aspect of it. Because we did have a conversation. It was like, how are your relationships? Are you harboring any stress and anger? And he was like, he told me what it was. And I'm like, yeah, we got to get rid of that. You have to identify that. And it was a toxic work partner, kind of similar to you. And he was like, well, I own the business, so that's easy.
Right.
So we're just identifying those things. You have to have somebody that's going to help you see the big picture.
Right.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
But again, it's about having real conversations, finding someone that will sit down and get to know you and what you need and what your goals are. And I do agree with you, like, having that questionnaire, like, just seeing just last menstrual period, that was, or are you having hot flashes? That was the only question about menopause.
That's it.
Because there are other symptoms.
So many. So many. I mean, I felt like it should be sectioned off, sort of. Like, to me, and again, I love this gynecologist, so she did everything right. But in looking at that questionnaire, I wasn't on it. Does that make sense? Uh-huh. I wasn't on it. It was all about, are you nursing? Are you on birth control? The only place I was on it was, are you having hot flashes? And I'm actually not anymore. So I couldn't even answer that. So if she looked at my questionnaire, she would have had no information about me other than the fact that I was not pregnant.
Right.
And I just thought, this is incorrect. And it was one of the most thorough questionnaires I've taken in an OBGYN. It was very thorough. However, it left out, I mean, there's so many symptoms to menopause. And I bet there's like a top 5.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them is hot flashes. But I mean, like, I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep. I mean, you could have hit me in the head with a hammer and I would have stayed awake. I just couldn't sleep. Low libido, mood swings. Those are all pretty common. And vaginal dryness. I have so many women friends who are just dry. Mm-hmm. And I think that must be terrible, because as much as you would want to have sex,
it hurts.
That would hurt a lot. And that would bring in so many other instruments and, tools to help you just be moist. Mm-hmm. And, you take for granted when things are working. Like you said, you've rolled your shoulder and you're like, oh my gosh. I don't know. Did you watch that Oprah special that I talked about?
I did.
And Dr. Marie Claire was like, I apologize to all of my patients, my pre-menopause patients. And when I went through menopause, I was inspired to learn and I changed the way I practiced. I feel like that is so valid and true.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like having a baby. You can prepare, someone can tell you what it's like to have a baby until you have a baby.
Right.
And then you go, oh shit, that was not what I was expecting. And menopause is similarly. And I wish society, I am lucky that I have a partner who is inarguably not the most sensitive guy. However, in this process, he has been very kindly curious. He's been very kind in going, this is not in her control. And I don't know what's happening, not just with the rage, but even just the sweating. Sweating is disgusting. Do you think he wants to roll over to like a wet dolphin? No one does, but he does. I've started snoring. I've never snored in my life. I'm not heavy, but my boobs have gotten so big. I went from like a B cup to a full D, like that. And even with all this hormone replacement, they're not going away. And so when I lay on my back, I start snoring and he's like, who are you that you're snoring all of a sudden? There have been so many changes that thank God he has looked at me and gone sort of like, bless her heart. There's nothing she can do here.
Yeah.
This is not her. This is just humanity. This is being a woman at this age and loving me more for it. That's been our experience. But I don't think a lot of women know what's happening enough to know that that's what's happening. And men definitely don't know what's happening.
No, they don't. They don't. We're not taught that in school. It's a taboo subject. It's a mental health thing. Oh, she's crazy. And they just kind of tiptoe around it because nobody's having an open conversation like, hey, this is an internal chaos that's happening. I cannot control it. Help me make it make sense. Let me get through this process. In a week, it's going to be a little bit better.
Right.
Because the chaos will be in a different level.
Right.
But yeah, it's, we just don't, I think it's coming. I think we're making big changes.
I think so.
Dr. Haver, she probably doesn't know me. I know her. We used to work together at the hospital. We did rounds at the hospital, and she was so it was my first time to doing my hospital rounds, and I was like, oh gosh, I have to go and do this computer training, and all of these doctors are in this room, and I was just so intimidated, and I'm a very shy person anyway. And, I walk in this room and I'm like, oh gosh, and I don't know if I deserve to be here. I've got this pit in my stomach. And she reaches out and she's like, hi. And she kind of grabs on my wrist and she's like, you can sit here. And I was like, oh. She's like, we're going to learn. there was another doctor there. Her first name was Joy, and I can't remember her last name. But we sat at the end of the table there to learn this part of the new charting system. And I was like, thank you for being kind. And when she would see me in the hospital, she was always very nice. And I saw a couple of her patients and we exchanged some things. And then she blows up on social media. I'm like, this lady's real. Like, she is real. And that was a genuine apology to, and I know myself too. I have patients that I'm like, oh, I could have done better. I could have made a better decision. I could have listened a little bit better. I could have done something different. That's part of learning and growing and making it better for the next person, and that's where we are, making it better for our daughters, making it better for the next generation. My next goal, I would love to get into the medical and nursing school training programs and start talking about this.
That was my next question, what was your next goal?
I would love that. My highest priority right now, not just highest priority, I want to say getting the postpartum depression discussion out there, that it is not a mental health problem. It is a real hormonal emergency. And I don't think people understand that. They may ask you questions, are you having the postpartum blues? But until you felt that darkness and the empty, that you do not belong on this earth anymore and everyone else will be better off without you, until you felt that, until you have been in that darkness, you can't understand it. You can't qualify it or quantify it because you just don't know what it feels like. So let's have the discussion. So when people, after they have the baby or, when they're first home, trying to get into their new routine, that's when you need your support. Mm-hmm. And I think we've kind of gone against having that community and having people come over because we don't want to touch the baby. We don't want to this. And we're missing that. We have to do things alone. And I do think, we've had some isolation with, it's easy after social media. I can keep up with everybody just scrolling on my phone. Just everybody's good. And there's less community. There's less, meeting down at the water well and, helping each other where we can. I try to create my own community. I try to be just supporting other moms. I'm like, I'll take your kid to school, do whatever, you need me to help with this, I'll drop this off or whatever. And that it's huge. My group of friends, we are very supportive, and I feel sad when someone doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. So I would make that advice, find it, go to church, go to, I don't know,
volunteer somewhere.
Well, exactly. There's a ton of Facebook groups. If you like chickens, there's a chicken Facebook group.
Yes,
friends.
For sure.
I like the color purple. There's all kinds of things that you can find common ground on and just, have a good support that makes a big difference. Because, feeling like you're isolated, feeling like you're alone, feeling like you have all these symptoms and you don't have anybody to talk to, or you're being dismissed by your partner and your doctor. And, it feels lonely.
It is lonely when you're having moments like that. I think if I would like people listening who either haven't been through menopause or haven't had postpartum or are a man and will never experience those things, to understand how important it is to feel seen, mm-hmm. and to feel like validated is such a catchword. But when I had that rageful moment and the next morning woke up and was so embarrassed, I was so embarrassed, and I felt terrible for Bert because I had just been so nasty. And, there have been times when he deserved to be nasty, and I wasn't. And I just felt so terrible that when I walked in and said, I am so sorry, I didn't have to say anything else. That's all I had to say. And he went, it's not a problem. That was not you. I get that your body is doing something that you don't have control over. And now listen, that doesn't give anybody license to be an asshole or to be violent. At the same time, that patience and care that I received in that moment of vulnerability, of feeling really bad and knowing that I really couldn't have done much about it in the moment, was what I needed. And even when I was telling you, when I had postpartum, I finally went to the doctor because Isla was about 8 months old, maybe 9 months old. And I was so angry. I went in the bathroom and took the lid off the toilet and broke it over the toilet seat because I was so mad at her. What could an 8-month-old have possibly done? Nothing, you know? when I broke the toilet seat, I went, I need to go to the doctor. And I immediately called Bert, and he was on the road, and said, this is what I've just done. And he met me the same way he met me that morning when I apologized for being angry. So what I would wish for anybody listening is that you have Bert's perspective when your partner, your sister, your mother is going through these moments of hormonal chaos. That's a perfect way of putting it, because that makes it so much gentler. I was gentler on me because he was gentle with me.
Right.
If he had not been gentle with me, I would have been far harder on myself, and it just wasn't necessary. I called you the same day and you went, here's why. Look right here. This is the problem. So let's adjust your hormones, and it stopped. And you were like, and you had too much sugar, and you're traveling, and you're sleeping, and you're probably in the cycle where things were wacky anyway, and someone just said the wrong thing at the wrong time, but it's right here.
Yep.
And then we fixed it, and I haven't had even an inkling of that again. So thank you so much for all you have done to make me feel better in my own skin, to progress my longevity, to support me as a woman and as a human being, to support my husband in his process and in mine, because you have been supportive to him in my journey. And I just adore you. I wish I lived where you live so I could be one of your friends. Too far away. I mean, I think we're friendly enough. We are friends.
Yeah, of course.
But I think you are truly doing the Lord's work, for lack of a better term. And I hope nurses listening are inspired to, nurses or doctors or nurse practitioners are inspired to seek out more knowledge and become more like you in that way of wanting to know not only about the wheel, but all the spokes on it and how everything works together, because it's been truly a gift to me. So I know I talked to you about this. I have some ladies in my office, Kathy and Stacy, who are on the podcast, are going to go through this with you. And I'm saying this out loud to everybody, I don't need to know what you guys talk about in the room. I'm not invasive in that way. Their medical history and journey is private, but I am interested in their experience of it. So whatever you guys are all comfortable sharing, I would like for people to hear, because I think I can't sing the praises enough to how positively it has affected me. I was working out with my trainer and eating very strictly and still gaining weight and really frustrated. And when I started this process with you a couple months ago, he was like, you are just looking like so phenomenal. And he said to me, what you've been looking for this whole time is justice. You were doing everything to take care of your health without justice. You didn't feel good and you didn't look good. Your libido wasn't there and you were lacking justice. So what you gave me was some justice.
Oh, that's huge. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking time to sit with me. Is there anything you want to say to wrap us up?
Well, there's a big difference between lifespan and health span. And so when you're looking at it, when people talk about, I'm going to get on this so I live longer. Yeah, that's part of it, but I want to have the life that goes with it, the energy, the vitality. I want you picking up your grandkids and just living your best life. So the earlier you start, the better your health span is versus just your lifespan. So I make a joke. It's not too late.
It's never too late.
It's never too late. The best time is now.
The best time is now. How does someone find you?
The easiest way is waystowell.com. That's our main website. You can find us on social media too. It's WAYS, 2, WELL.
And we'll put links on all of our stuff too. I just wanted you to say it. So if anybody's listening, they can hear it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to this journey with Stacy and Kathy, and Christine's going to do it too. I can't wait for you to see how it positively affects their life, because I think it will.
Yeah. And every person, again, you're going to see the different journey of the different biochemistry of what she needs versus what she needs. She may have a completely different, she may not need anything.
Yeah.
And just, a little bit of vitamin.
Oh, they all need a little something, if you know what I mean. They all do. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
You guys will all be synced up and everybody's happy.
I know, right? Well, thank you. Enjoy your trip to LA.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.